I'm Vivian Aldridge. They always said Ethan had vision. What they never saw was mine. It happened over dinner. Crystal glasses, roasted duck, the usual performance. My mother raised a toast to my acceptance letter to Princeton, and 5 minutes later, told me they were giving my tuition fund to Ethan for a business opportunity. Just like that. Everything I worked for? Gone. My father called me immature. My mother said community college wasn't shameful. Ethan didn't even want the money. But no one asked me what I wanted. They never did. So I stood up. I folded my napkin, and I said, "Thank you for the dinner. It's the last time I'll eat at this table." I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I packed a backpack with $128, a toothbrush, and a dream. And I walked out. If they've ever told you to be realistic while handing your dream to someone else, this story is for you. Drop a comment if you've ever been the overlooked one. Like this video if you've ever had to start from scratch just to prove you were never the problem. Subscribe, because sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the first act of engineering your own legacy. The scent of roasted duck and rosemary potatoes clung to the air, familiar and suffocating. I adjusted the napkin on my lap, fingers trembling beneath the white linen as my mother's voice danced across the long oak table. "To Vivian," she said, lifting her crystal glass in a toast. "Princeton. An Ivy League woman just like her father always dreamed." I smiled thinly, too aware of how quickly dreams here could be revoked. The Princeton envelope still sat folded in my lap, its edges slightly creased from being clutched so tightly all day. I hadn't dared open it until I was alone, until I'd locked the bathroom door and let the thrill ripple silently across my face. But now, here I was, celebrating the very thing I feared they might take away. My father adjusted his cufflinks, the diamond studs catching the chandelier light like tiny knives. "We're proud," he said. "Very proud." My brother Ethan reached for the bread basket, uninterested. I caught Aunt Ruth watching me from the far end, her expression unreadable, almost tense. I should have known. This house had never been a place of safety, only appearances. "Vivian," my mother began sweetly, "we're thrilled for you, darling, but we've discussed something important. Your father, Ethan, and I." That's when my stomach dropped. "Given Ethan's upcoming business opportunity," she continued, laying her hand gently on his wrist, "we've decided it's best to invest the full college fund toward supporting him for now. He'll be enrolling in the Chicago executive program next semester." The words didn't hit me all at once. They settled like ash. Slow, choking, final. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't ask for that," he mumbled. My father smiled, oblivious or indifferent. "It's what's best for the family. Vivian, you'll understand when you're older." I stared at my plate. The potatoes blurred. My grip on the envelope in my lap tightened until the edge bit into my palm. "You're giving him my tuition?" "You don't need to see it that way," my mother said. "This is an opportunity to be flexible. Community college isn't shameful, sweetheart." "But I earned this. You said if I got into an Ivy, you'd—" "Don't be childish," my father snapped. "It's always me with you. Ethan needs this. You'll adjust." "I will not adjust," I said, my voice lower than I expected. "I won't sit here and celebrate while you hand over my future." "You're being selfish," he said coldly. "Immature. This is about more than just you." Across the table, Aunt Ruth set down her wine glass. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She reached out, placed a warm, steady hand on my shoulder, and looked at me. Really looked at me. There was sorrow in her eyes. And something else. Resolve. She stood silently and left the room. The silverware clinked awkwardly in her absence. My mother adjusted her pearls. My brother avoided eye contact. And I stood. "Thank you for the dinner," I said, folding my napkin with deliberate grace. "It's the last time I'll eat at this table." I walked upstairs. They didn't follow. In my bedroom, I stuffed the bare minimum into my old Navy backpack. My passport, a phone charger, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush. The envelope from Princeton went in last. Then I opened the shoebox beneath my bed. Inside, $128 saved from months of tutoring the Montgomery twins down the street. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't leave a note. I didn't look back. I left that night with a backpack, a passport, and $128. Turns out it was enough. Nobody asks questions when you mop floors and don't look them in the eye. The linoleum tiles at Marie's diner never quite lost their grime, no matter how hard I scrubbed. Grease clung to the corners like secrets, and every shift ended with the same cracked vinyl stool beneath me and a lukewarm bowl of tomato soup that tasted like tin and mercy. I wasn't Vivian Aldridge anymore. I was no one. And that was perfect. It had been 3 weeks since I stepped off that bus from Connecticut and handed over $62 in cash to the manager of the Elmwood Motel. No questions asked. A weekly rate, cash only. Room 207 smelled like bleach and hopelessness. I made it mine. The name on the registry, Kate Morgan. Kate was quiet. Kate didn't ask for help. Kate worked double shifts and didn't wear mascara. Most nights I stayed after closing to mop, refill the napkin dispensers, or help Maria carry the crates in from her old Chevy. She didn't smile much, but she noticed things. The way I counted the register with precision. How I kept my receipts in neat stacks. How I never called home. "You have that look," she said one night, setting down a steaming pot of chili. "Like you're hiding from something." "I'm just tired," I replied. She grunted. "Aren't we all?" Then came Lisa. She was 14, braces and bangs and big brown eyes that looked like they wanted to trust the world but didn't quite yet. She hung around after school, waiting for Maria to finish the dinner rush. One afternoon, she sat at the counter with an algebra worksheet, muttering under her breath and stabbing at her calculator like it owed her money. "You're carrying the exponent too early," I said before I could stop myself. Lisa blinked. "What?" I slid the paper closer. "You need to distribute the negative before squaring anything. See?" Maria raised an eyebrow as she refilled the coffee pot. "You went to school?" I hesitated. "Some," I said carefully. The next day, Maria asked if I'd help Lisa prep for a test. "Just a couple sessions," she added. "I'll cover your meals." We met 3 times that week in the booth by the window. Lisa was smart, just scared of being wrong. I recognized that. She picked things up fast. Faster than I expected. On Friday, Maria watched her daughter breeze through a worksheet and turned to me. "You ever think of doing this for real?" I shrugged. "Who'd hire me?" Maria looked me dead in the eye. "You've got a gift. People notice that." By Sunday, she'd mentioned me to 3 other mothers at church. Monday morning, my first voicemail came in. "Hi, is this Miss Morgan? I heard you worked wonders with Lisa." My heart skipped, not because she was wrong, but because she wasn't. That night, I took out the last $50 from my envelope. The bills folded, thin, soft from handling, and walked 4 blocks to the printing shop on Myrtle Avenue. The man behind the counter asked for a name. "Kate Morgan," I said. The cards were matte cream with black serif letters, private academic coaching. Kate Morgan. I stared at them longer than I should have. Back in my room, I placed the cards next to a plain white envelope. It had arrived at the diner 3 days prior, forwarded from a handwriting I hadn't seen since the night everything changed. "For when you're ready," it said on the front. I hadn't opened it. But I hadn't thrown it away either. Some nights, I held it under the glow of the motel lamp, wondering if there was a second betrayal folded inside. Or something else. I didn't know what I'd find when I finally tore the seal. But tonight, that didn't matter. Another voicemail pinged. "Miss Morgan? I was hoping you had time for my son. He struggles with reading comprehension." I didn't correct her. Kate Morgan was who I needed to be now. Power grows best in the dark, until it's strong enough to cast its own shadow. My first tutoring website was barely more than a contact form and a photo of a smiling Lisa holding her honor roll certificate. I called it MindBridge. I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but the name felt clean, safe. Every time someone called me Kate, I felt Vivian fade, but not disappear. By fall of 2015, I'd saved enough to rent a cramped office in Cambridge. 3 rooms, peeling linoleum, and a window that overlooked the back of a liquor store. But it had a door with my name on it. Kate Morgan, Academic Coaching Services. I stared at that name longer than I did my own reflection. It was here I built my network. One of my first recruits was Jenna Liu, a Harvard sophomore looking for flexible hours and cash. Then came Marcus, then Priya, then 5 more. I trained them personally. I wrote the handbook. I created a scheduling matrix with rotating subject clusters. We called it the Hive. Clients came from all over: Newton, Brookline, Wellesley, then Greenwich. That's where I met Emma Chen. She was 16, rail-thin with charcoal smudges under her eyes from staying up too late scrolling through science fiction fan pages. She greeted me at the door like I was the hired help, then slumped into her leather chair with a sigh. "I hate calculus," she announced. "It hates me more." But she was bright. Curious, even. Under the attitude was someone dying to be seen. We worked twice a week. In 3 months, her C became an A-. In 5, she could outpace the textbook. But it wasn't just math she wanted to talk about. "My dad's worried," she mumbled one afternoon, eyes on her nails. "He says the company's in trouble. Some tech patent failed. Their energy thing didn't scale." I paused. "Energy?" "Yeah," she nodded. "Storage module or something. He said they invested millions in this version 4 prototype, and it's still not viable." My stomach clenched. The next session, I arrived 10 minutes early. Emma wasn't home yet, but the housekeeper ushered me into the study, James Chen's office. I didn't snoop. Not exactly. But the folder was right there on the desk. Energy storage prototype version 4. Schematics spilled across the top page. I recognized the mistake before I could stop myself. A flaw in the thermal transfer layer. A limitation in the conversion ratio. Ethan made the same assumptions when he stole my high school project and tried to repurpose it. Only, he'd never understood the core math. And clearly, neither did Chen's engineers. That night, I powered on the old USB from my Princeton prep days. The files were still there. Adaptive capacitor module, Vivian Aldridge, AP Physics capstone. I opened it, scrolled past the cover page. I smiled. He built it wrong. In that moment, my past didn't burn. It didn't hurt. It pulsed, like voltage returning to a wire long left dead. I didn't need revenge. I needed proof of what I could build. And he never could. I didn't knock. I walked into his boardroom like I already belonged there. The receptionist at Chentech Solutions had blinked twice when I gave her my name. She double-checked the list, her voice faltering. "You're from Morgan Enterprises?" "Yes," I said simply. No need to elaborate. Ethan failed at energy storage. I was about to succeed where he imploded. James Chen didn't look up when I entered. His fingers drummed a slow rhythm against the armrest of a leather chair, eyes fixed on the 3 monitors behind the boardroom table. He spoke without turning. "I don't take meetings with consultants, especially ones without technical credentials." I let the silence hold. Then Emma, now a junior at Stanford, spoke. She stood by the glass wall, arms folded. "Dad, I'm asking for 5 minutes. Not for her. For me." He sighed. 3. I walked to the screen, connected my laptop, and opened the simulation. The room dimmed, the ambient noise of the city falling away behind tempered glass. A 3D model rotated slowly, pulsing red where energy loss was occurring in Chentech's current prototype. "Version 4, I said, pointing. "Your engineers compensated for compression, but they overlooked progressive degradation in the converter module." James leaned forward. I clicked once. "And this," I said, loading my own model. is what happens when you replace the transfer layer with a dynamic feedback loop. The red zones turned green. Energy output climbed by 17.3%. The room was still. He didn't speak for a full 20 seconds. "Where did you go to school?" "I didn't," I said. "But I built this when I was 17. He didn't ask anything else. He nodded toward Emma, who smiled like she already knew how this would go. The next day, I received a call from a lawyer in Palo Alto. "Mr. Chen has agreed to a 9-month testing partnership. He's prepared to sign." "I want 40%, I said. There was a pause on the line. Then, "He'll call you back." 3 hours later, the contract arrived, with my terms intact. 9 months. That's how long it took to turn Chentech from a gasping liability into the poster child of energy innovation. Tech blogs called it a resurrection. Shareholders called it a miracle. James called it precision. And I called my lawyer. By December 2020, Kate Morgan's holding company, Morgan Enterprises LLC, quietly acquired 40% of Montgomery Technology's outstanding debt. No fanfare, no press release, just paperwork. The board had no idea who was behind it. Not yet. But I did. I sat in my glass-walled office overlooking the bay, thumbing through the Montgomery file. Ethan's name was everywhere. He was their new director of innovation. 10 years ago, they said I wasn't worth the investment. Let's see what they'll say when they pitch their lives. To me. 10 years ago, they sat me at the kids' table. Today, I own the building. The Montgomery Technologies headquarters hadn't aged well. The brushed steel accents were scratched now, the white walls tinged with fatigue. The waiting lounge smelled like overbrewed coffee and desperation. But the shareholder meeting room, ice cold and overly lit, still held a sense of performance, like a play that refused to close. They were already seated when I entered. Ethan, in a tailored navy suit, smirked like he knew something no one else did. His jaw clenched just enough to betray the nerves. Richard and Susan sat side by side, polished but frayed around the edges. Age hadn't softened them. It had merely drained their volume. The lawyer from Morgan Enterprises stood at the back, briefcase in hand, unreadable. Maria stood near the door, arms crossed, coat untouched. She wasn't supposed to be here, but she came anyway. She always did. "You're not mature enough," Dad once said. "So I built a company instead of growing up. They didn't recognize me. Not at first." The man from the board cleared his throat. "We appreciate Morgan Enterprises' interest. As you know, Montgomery is facing several liquidity challenges due to unforeseen miscalculations in our energy division." Unforeseen. I listened. "Of course, with the right partnership," Richard continued, "we believe this company can return to its former position of—" "I know about the energy failures," I said, interrupting. All heads turned. Ethan's brow furrowed. "Excuse me, who exactly are you?" I stood. I fixed it. The screen behind me flickered to life. A clean graph appeared. Chentech's growth curve over the past 18 months. Next to it, energy output charts, technology reports, patent filings. My name beneath each innovation. "And I own 40% of your debt," I continued, letting the silence stretch. "Legally, irreversibly." The lawyer nodded once, confirming. I could see it then. The flicker in Ethan's eyes. The dawning horror. The unraveling. "My name is Vivian Aldridge, and I'm the investment you walked away from." Susan's hand flew to her mouth. Richard tried to speak, but faltered. "You," Ethan hissed. "You did this?" "You did this," I said, turning the tablet toward them. "Your department lost $12 million last fiscal year, and that's just the damage we can trace." He started to argue, but the lawyer laid down the documents. Line by line, they listed the losses. Audit trails, signatures, approvals, all his. "You had the chance to learn," I said. "You chose to pretend you knew everything. Now here are my terms." The room stilled. First, Ethan resigns. Entirely. No consulting, no ghost titles, no severance. He turned crimson. Second, Richard and Susan retire. You will release all management rights, completely. And third, I stepped forward, placing a white envelope on the table, sealed. You will sign this transfer of authority today in full view of your remaining board. Richard opened his mouth again. I cut him off. This is not a negotiation. You don't have options. I do. I turned. Maria met my eyes with something soft, something proud. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Behind me, the room remained silent, except for the gentle scratch of pens against paper, signing away the legacy they once hoarded. I left with $128. I returned with an empire. I never wanted revenge. I wanted clarity. Turns out, clarity wears a power suit and signs paychecks. The Grand Hall still carried the Montgomery name, but now it sat beneath a newer line, sleeker and more precise. Montgomery Aldridge Technologies. No gold leaf, no ornate plaques. Just brushed steel on matte black stone, as clean and deliberate as the woman now stepping onto the stage. I didn't pause behind the curtain, didn't rehearse the words. This moment wasn't about spectacle. It was about ownership. Not of buildings or titles, but of story. The lights dimmed slightly as the cameras began to roll. I stepped up to the podium. No notes, no teleprompter. 10 years ago, I began. I left home with $128 and a backpack. A few murmurs rippled through the press row. I let them settle. I didn't leave out of anger. I left because staying would have meant agreeing that my worth could be measured by someone else's expectations. Behind me, the new company slogan glowed softly on the screen. Not inherited, engineered. Today, I continued, Montgomery Aldridge Technologies turns a page, not as a company built on legacy, but on merit, innovation, and resilience. We won't erase the name. We'll redefine it. Maria stood at the side, chin lifted, eyes focused. She hadn't said a word since I told her she'd be COO. She just nodded once, like the decision had been obvious all along. After the press cleared out, I stepped into the quiet of the memorabilia gallery. Glass cases lined the walls, each holding the pieces no one else had seen. My first motel receipt, $89.52, paid in cash. The laminated elite academic card, corners curled. The Princeton letter, creased but never thrown away. And in the center, a small sealed envelope. I opened it. Inside was Aunt Ruth's handwriting. Simple, sharp. Vivian, you were always the legacy. Not Ethan. Not the name. You. I couldn't fight their decisions, but I could make sure you had the tools to fight back. I see you now, and I am proud. R. No tears. Just breathe. I placed the letter gently behind the glass, folding the flap open to show the signature. Later that evening, long after the cameras and whispers had faded, I sat in the CEO's office. Mine now, watching the live stock ticker crawl upward on the screen. The building was quiet. The world, less so. But inside there was peace. I held the envelope, now opened, in my hand. $128 started my escape. Legacy. Started here. They didn't just steal her future. They erased it with a smile and called it love. At that dinner table 10 years ago, when her parents handed everything she'd earned to her brother, they weren't merely favoring a child. They were endorsing a hierarchy that said effort meant nothing if it didn't come wrapped in entitlement. That night, Vivian Aldridge ceased to exist, not by choice, but by force. And so, in the quiet, overlooked corners of the world, Kate Morgan was born. Not to hide, but to prepare. She worked in silence, obscurity her ally. While her family attended galas and built legacies on borrowed prestige, she was scrubbing floors, solving equations, and planting the seeds of something they never anticipated, a life unbound by their approval. She didn't fight back with fury. She fought back with structure, with data, with design. Her revenge was never loud. It was strategic, impeccably timed, irrefutable. When she finally walked into that boardroom, carrying not just her name but the weight of her past, the room didn't recognize her, but it listened. For the first time, the silence served her. No screaming, no demands, just numbers, signatures, and a surname they had discarded, now engraved on the door they could no longer enter without permission. But here's the quiet brilliance of her journey. It wasn't about revenge at all. Vivian didn't return to destroy. She returned to redefine. She kept the Montgomery name, not as a tribute to the ones who betrayed her, but as a monument to the truth. That legacy doesn't come from bloodlines or bank accounts. It comes from grit, from survival, from building a foundation with the very hands once deemed unworthy to shape it. Her final act wasn't a speech or a confrontation. It was the placement of a sealed letter, now opened into a glass display. A message from the only family member who had believed in her silently, giving her what no one else had: the chance to choose who she wanted to be. That letter didn't scream vengeance. It whispered recognition. And sometimes that's all a person needs to heal what was broken. This story wasn't about a girl reclaiming her inheritance. It was about a woman reclaiming her narrative. And that's what injustice often underestimates. It assumes silence means surrender, that walking away means losing. But those who've been underestimated learn the most dangerous skill of all: patience. Because patience, when guided by clarity and purpose, becomes power. Not the kind that crushes others, but the kind that rebuilds what they destroyed. Vivian's victory wasn't just financial. It was ethical, psychological, structural. She didn't just win back what was hers. She outgrew the very system that told her she couldn't. And in doing so, she created a model of justice that didn't depend on approval, but on accountability. To the outsider, it may have looked like a business turnaround. But to anyone who's ever been gaslit by their own family, belittled for their ambition, or punished for daring to be different, it was a revolution. Her $128 escape wasn't just a financial leap. It was an act of radical self-respect. It said, "I'd rather have nothing that's mine than everything that's yours under false terms." And years later, that very integrity became the compass that brought her full circle, not to reclaim the seat they denied her, but to build the table herself. If there's one lesson to draw from her path, it's this: justice doesn't come gift-wrapped. It doesn't knock politely. Sometimes it arrives dressed as persistence, disguised in setbacks, carried by the ones no one ever expected would rise. And when it does arrive, it may not undo the pain, but it does make meaning out of it. Because in a world that often rewards appearances over authenticity, real power lies in choosing truth, even when it costs you everything. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. So, if you've ever been cast aside, don't wait for applause. Build your silence into structure. Build your heartbreak into vision. And when you return, not to beg, but to lead, remember this: the strongest legacies aren't inherited. They're engineered. They erased my future with a single decision. But I didn't disappear. I redesigned. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to reclaim what was always mine, on my terms. So if you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, if they gave your chance to someone else and expected you to smile, this isn't just my story. It's yours too. Tell me below. What moment made you walk away from what broke you? Like this video if you've ever had to build in the shadows. Subscribe, because someday the world will ask how you did it. And you'll say, "I started with $128 and the truth." My name is Vivian Aldridge. For years, I used the back door. Not because I was late, but because they never made room at the front. They called it tradition. They said it was easier this way. What they meant was stay small, stay quiet, stay invisible. I nodded. I smiled. I moved without making waves. And while they laughed over champagne and legacies they didn't earn, I built something they never saw coming. This morning, they're asking to speak with a manager. What they don't know is, the manager is me. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, if you've ever been told you're too quiet to lead or too polite to win, then this story is for you. Drop a comment if you've ever walked through a back door and knew one day it'd be yours. Subscribe for stories that aren't loud, but last. Because sometimes the most powerful sentence is, Director Aldridge will see you now. The back door, Madeline. Please. My mother didn't whisper like she was embarrassed. She whispered like I was the embarrassment. I stepped out of the car and smoothed the front of my dress.